All right, good to have you back. Let's now begin by taking a look at the headlines of today's newspapers. Of course, all Nigerian newspapers, The Punch, The Daily Sun, The Nation, and the Vanguard.
Absolutely.
We'll be doing this with Ayodele Adio, as usual. He's here with us this morning. Good to see you.
Good morning.
Same here. Thank you for having me.
Okay, let's begin with The Punch. Senate, others attack El Rufai's government over demolition of APC factions headquarters. Many observers are saying now this APC crisis in Kaduna is taking a new dimension.
You know, it's quite sad that we have a lot of, you know, authoritarians, if you'd like, you know, masquerading as progressives in our country. Very thin-skinned politicians, if you'd like. And
intolerant of
exactly.
opposition.
You know, I've always argued that democracy in itself is not really about persons, but about the ideals, you know, and the institutions that govern a country. And it's quite sad that just days after, you know, a few groups of people, you know, had suspended you, and if you were sure, for instance, that it was, you know, a faction of the party that was not recognized by the national body, you didn't need to bother going to that length. But of course, you know, during the electioneering campaigns, he was popular in the streets of Kaduna as Rousseau, which is the man who brings down buildings. So maybe
so he's living up to his.
So he's probably living up to his expectations.
But don't forget when he was minister for the FCT.
Oh yes,
he
you know
did a lot of
course that's what earned him the name in Kaduna, because people were excited, Rousseau, and of course. But it's quite sad that you have a lot of very thin-skinned.
Well, the reasons given by the government was that the building owner, Senator Hunkuyi, you know, had flagrant violation of the land use, and then didn't pay ground rent since 2010. So you wonder, since then, why now?
He just realized that last week. You know?
Just woke up to it. All right, we've imported $5.8 billion petrol since late 2017, says NNPC. $5.8 billion. How much does it cost to build refineries?
I mean, that's quite an esoteric question.
About $1.5 billion or $1.9 billion. I can't recall the exact number.
Okay, so we can get at least 3 refineries
to establish the 3 refineries. So,
I mean,
it's
quite sad that this country is still not serious, you know, about the future of a country without oil. So we must get serious as a country. We need to look closely at the petroleum sector and ask ourselves very tough questions. How come we're still having fuel queues for the past 2 months? I mean, it's going to 3 months now, since December or since November last year. And we seem not to have answers to the questions. The Senate have given marching orders. The President has given marching orders. The Minister for State has given marching orders. Yet it defies all logic that you still have queues at the filling station. It's quite sad. People are paying way above 145 naira in various states in the country, and yet there are no solutions to it.
In fact, after Nigerians were told that subsidy was removed, and later on they found
and 3
out
things
that
are paramount here. First of all, this
171.
country must begin to think of a Nigeria without oil, because the U.S., because of its oil, is going to be cutting its purchase of oil by 2020. We need to think
some
beyond
countries
oil.
are even preparing to start using vehicles.
By 20, in another 5 years, 10 years, you know, countries like the Netherlands, are phasing out
you know that
petrol-powered cars.
Oh yes.
All right, let's quickly move on. Herdsmen killings, reps begin propose loans for ranching. All right, very interesting one. INEC, CX, that's State Electoral Commissions, meet today over underage voting. Remember the video that went viral about underage voters, kids between 15.
I mean, it's younger than 15.
Younger than that.
You know, I remember I remember closely
after
that
INEC officials denied the allegation that they registered underage voters.
Well, the INEC chairman has tried to explain that away, saying, you know, in some cases, the lives of election officials
were threatened.
You know, are threatened, and so they have to allow people who want to do such things. Yeah.
I mean, is that excusable? Is that excusable? Because if you saw the queue, the hundreds and hundreds of these underage voters who going to vote, you have concerns for the 2019 elections. And for INEC to say that because they were threatened, nothing could be done.
But
That's a cheap excuse around the country.
Cheap, really? Would you blame INEC officials that, for example, when they go to these remote areas where they are not from, you know, sometimes when they carry out a PVC registration, for example, they are not protected. They just go there alone.
But these same INECs have suspended elections on 2-3 occasions because the security situation did not guarantee those elections.
Speak up?
Exactly.
Okay, so we go to the Nation newspaper. The major story here, just as Bunch had it, the outrage as El Rufai pulls down Senator's building. Governor, ground rent not paid. It is politics. That's according to Senator Hunkuyi, the owner of the building. So the picture story here, Dana airplane skids off runway in Port Harcourt. It was a scare really in Nigeria yesterday, but thankfully nobody got hurt.
Exactly.
All the passengers.
I just have so much pity for the organization, because it seems that every news that comes out is something
negative. Yes. Okay, so we go to the top of the Nation on the left. Senator gets February the 28th order to produce Kanu, that's Senator Eyinaya Baribe, alongside 2 other sureties of Nnamdi Kanu, that if they do not produce him on the set date of February the 28th, they could lose their 100 million naira surety amount.
I mean, is that not the million-dollar question in Nigeria today, that where is
he just
suddenly disappeared into thin air? And of course, in a constitutional democracy, you know, it's quite sad how we run things in this country, because it seems as though if it's not our own, it's not a problem. So if Kanu disappears, the rest of the country just takes a dubious silence because it's not our own. If El Zazaki is locked up somewhere for 2 years without trial, he's not our own. We look the other way. And I keep saying that a tragedy to one person somewhere is going to be a tragedy to everybody. If you allow impunity to grow, it's just going to get to your doorstep. So we need to ask these questions, that where is Nnamdi Kanu?
Nnamdi Kanu, especially someone that we know that has been very vocal.
Exactly.
He's very vocal,
totally silent.
Now
the silence is so loud.
Nobody knows his
deaf, loud
whereabouts.
silence. And the wife has been talking, saying, accusing the government anyway. Anyway, we take this story. 4 held for dumping waste on Lagos roads. There was a story yesterday of the government accusing saboteurs of dumping refuse. Yes, now they arrested some.
I mean, it's become a conundrum for the Lagos state government. I do know that the governor and his minister, or his commissioner, sorry, for environment, really have good intentions to keep Lagos clean. But I think the strategy that was being applied, you know, was quite shaky, if you'd ask me. And it's just like a topsy-turvy kind of thing. They're 1 step forward, 2 step back. So they're really not getting the
And of course, the Lagos state government started by banning the kule-kules.
I think that was the mistake.
Is that an English name for those kule-kules?
Are you talking about the PSP operators or the
they're not. Well, they're PSP.
But I think that was the initial
you know, those scavengers. You might want to call them scavengers.
I think that was the initial mistake, you know, by the government, because they were quick to discard, you know, those kule-kules, like you said, and the PSPs.
Could have been absorbed.
They could have done that systematically and gradually to ease them off, while the people who they were bringing in, you know, had gained ground and had
I saw even told me that the government had to even call some of the PSP operators back to assist with this.
Oh yes, I think now you have no choice but to bring them back in, because they seem to cover more ground. They seem to have a lot more spread, you know, than the new. Yeah, they have a template. They seem to have a lot more spread.
It really is a monumental problem, refuse in Lagos. But the state government is doing all it can to solve that problem. 2019 election reordering saga. That's coming from the Daily Sun. Senate probes Buhari loyalists. 10 senators to face ethics committee. Of course, this reordering of election timetable seems to be causing a lot of drama. Some people think it's targeted at President Buhari.
But let me quickly say this. I think politicians everywhere in the world, let's not kid ourselves, are selfish people. They pursue selfish interests all around the world. The idea that a senator or a federal member of a republic anywhere in the world will solely sit in that office because of your interest solely is a joke. It's utopian. Because if that were so, the Americans would have passed the gun law today. Okay? But what people do, what advanced citizens or what citizens do in more robust democracies is that they try to align their interest with that of the people that represent them, or they look at the interest of the person in the house and see how it aligns with their own interest, however cynical it is, and then they pursue it.
And see how they can.
In this particular case, what we're not doing as a country is that we take sides easily. No, I'm with the Senate this time, I'm with the president.
And that's it. It doesn't
For
matter
me,
what.
when I look at this situation, it gives me or a country a clear opportunity to vote in people you want to be elected
that's
at
where the challenge
House of
is.
Assembly.
That's where the challenge is really, because many would tell you that even the next election that Nigerians are looking towards, how easy or how possible is it for many of those in the rural areas to vote their conscience?
No,
once they give them...
Do they even know who they are voting for in the first place? When you tell people vote your conscience,
I think this,
what do you know about them that you're voting for them?
I think this will give an opportunity for people to actually vote their conscience to an extent. Because I give you an example. A lot of people, a lot of governors today got into that office principally on the bandwagon of the Buhari campaign. All you needed to do in 2015 was to get an endorsement from President Buhari, and you were going to win an election. It was as easy as ABC. In fact, there were even jokes in many corners in the northern part of the country that even though you put a goat with the ticket of the APC, he's going to get into office. You know, what's the joke?
And
but
really, why are the senators so afraid?
So
I mean, don't they believe that Buhari on his own can actually win the election, whether the election comes first or in the middle or the last?
That's the point. I mean, that's why I said, why would I waste my time or my energy defending, the president if I feel he's popular enough to win an election? So for me...
Some senators actually said that really, that if Buhari is a good brand, as many are saying...
Yes, he's going to win the election.
They shouldn't be afraid.
So for me, let's leave it up in the open. What we don't want is this bandwagon effect, where you can go to villages and say, let us align with the center. That, of course, the presidential election is sorted out. The APC has won. You guys better align with the center. So that skews an election to some way that people don't... It doesn't really reflect the true...
Well, it's going to be a situation that's described as everyone for himself.
Oh yes.
All right, so we go to the last paper, the Vanguard. Same story on the Kaduna demolition is the major story there. Just brush through it. APC crisis latest. Governor demolishes senator's house with multiple riders. Senate condemns act, asks governor to rebuild house. Or why we demolished the building, Kaduna State Government Agency. Are soldiers not involved in demolition? That's according to NAMI. And then there's this picture down here, Benue killings mastermind. Intelligence response team of police paraded Haji Lagi, alleged 40-year-old leader of the herdsmen responsible for the attacks in Benue. He was arrested by RRT in Tungwa Forest, Nasarawa. That's where I'm even going. Tungwa, recall that Governor Samuel Oton mentioned it, that the perpetrators of the Benue killings were in Tungwa, and then the Nasarawa State Governor denied it. I was even angry.
I was on this desk when we discussed this issue at the time, where you even had the press secretary of the Nasarawa State Governor afterwards. And I said clearly then that nobody, probably because of the way the governor of Benue put it out, it made it look like the Nasarawa State Governor was harboring those people, which wasn't the case. But the truth of the matter was, because of the proximity of these two states, sometimes they run into these states, as a cover or a hideout for them to perpetrate some of these acts that they do. And so I wanted a situation where these two governors sat on the same table and discussed these issues to be sure that these people who are crisscrossing these borders are dealt with decisively. But it then turned into a, you're accusing me of this, I'm accusing you of that, and it doesn't make us move forward as a country. Listen, sometimes people think when some governors speak, I know that sometimes they can be cynical and sometimes they might be a little, but nobody sits down and is that oblivious of certain fact. When somebody says he has intelligence reports that these people are in this particular state, he knows what he's saying. But
unfortunately, some people go on
makes it look like it's just
defensive mode.
The guy cannot just wake up in the morning and say people are here.
Ayodele, that we seem not to see these challenges as Nigerian problems.
That's the problem. I don't know when we're going to wake up to that.
No, I still have some stories. 2019, we've lost confidence in INEC. We won't join issues with anybody or party INEC. 3 women sell two-month-old baby for 300,000 naira. We had one story like that of a couple selling their baby for 400,000 naira yesterday. Attacks. Herdsmen take oath in Ekiti, a show of peaceful coexistence. Well, that's where we'll stop because of time. Ayodele, thank you very much for coming to the studio.
Thank you very much.
Of course, we're still keeping you for our next discussion this morning on TVC Breakfast. Let's take a quick breather so you can chew on some of these issues we've raised. Well, not we. We've just read to you in the newspapers, and then we can come back and discuss. State police.
Stay with us.
Stay with us. Okay, we're glad to have you back.
Yeah, in the light of the serious security challenges in the country now, there have been renewed calls for the creation of state police. The need to decentralize and reform the police force has been central to discussions following ongoing killings in the north-central region of the country and in some other parts of the country.
Absolutely. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, the Nigerian Governors Forum and the Senate have all thrown their weight behind the creation of state police. And many Nigerians believe that the establishment of state and community police will reduce bureaucracy and lead to quick response to emergencies by the police.
Allow each federating unit to take charge of their states. Allow police, state security services to be owned by the state apparatus to be able to deal with issues precisely. When there are issues, I have to go and call IGP to explain. Sometimes IGP will not pick for 1 month. How can I be a chief security officer that cannot deploy ordinary vigilante?
We always trust Ayo Fayose to reveal some mind-boggling things that happen in a whole month. Will it take a whole month to for a state executive?
Funny, it might not be,
but it's a very serious issue if that really happens. Ayo Dele Adio, first off, you look, the groundswell has been, rising more or less, if I could put it that way, for state police. But then again, on the other hand, some people have been expressing fears. People like Shehu Sani, the senator representing Kaduna State, who is right now, you could say, is embattled, and he has seen firsthand what it means if absolute power of state police was given to a state governor. In his state. He said, look, let me give you some of the reasons he gives for not supporting state police. Says governors will use the security apparatus to empower political thugs, criminals, ethnic militia, cultists, secessionists, and religious fanatics. He says there will be abuse of power and state-sanctioned violence.
Unfortunately, stories like what you have on the headlines of most of the newspapers today, where the demolition of the senator's building gives credence to these fears and legitimizes the fear of certain people who argue that the state police will be tools in the hands of supreme governors, to stifle opposition or to oppress, voices that oppose certain policies of the state. And those are quite legitimate concerns. But, we have to look at the pros and cons of these issues, the merits of having a state police and the merit. But first of all, we must admit that each time we provide a solution to any problem, that solution in itself creates another problem. So while you try to solve the problem of climate change with renewable energy, and you use the solar energies and you create a huge, entirely new industry of solar energy, what you have simply done is to kill the industry of coal, and people who used to work in those industries will lose their jobs.
Jobless.
So when you put technology into a system, the people who automated it manually will lose their jobs. Gives credence to these fears and legitimizes the fear of certain people who argue that the state police will be tools in the hands of supreme governors, to stifle opposition or to oppress, voices that oppose certain policies of the state. And those are quite legitimate concerns. But, we have to look at the pros and cons of these issues, the merits of having a state police and the merit. But first of all, we must admit that each time we provide a solution to any problem, that solution in itself creates another problem. So while you try to solve the problem of climate change with renewable energy, and you use the solar energies and you create a huge, entirely new industry of solar energy, what you have simply done is to kill the industry of coal, and people who used to work in those industries will lose their jobs.
Jobless.
So when you put technology into a system, the people who automated it manually will lose their jobs. So every solution you prefer creates in itself its own corresponding problems. So there's a problem in the country today as we speak, and the problem is the fact that the Nigerian state is not effectively policed. And nobody's going to argue that. The Nigerian state is not effectively policed. And that is, it shows clearly.
And with statistics really of where we are at the moment, about just a little over 300,000 police officers are in the country, and a little over 150,000 among them have been attached to VIPs, really, doing escort jobs. And then you just recently, a few days ago, about 2 days ago or thereabouts, the IGP came out to say that they would start recruiting and just be 6,000 junior officers that would be employed.
Which is really not enough to do that. So like I said, we'll have to examine the pros and the cons. And the merits of having a state police is the fact that you can effectively police down to the local government, because what it means, because in most federating in countries that practice federalism, federalist system of government, of course, you know that it's adaptable. The federal system practiced in Brazil is not the same practice in India, and people try to adapt. But what you see in all of these countries is that they even have police down to local counties. All right, so the merits of having state police is that you can police down even to the local governments effectively. And second is the fact that intelligence are gathered a lot easier when you have police who are recruited from communities and your local governments at the end of the day. In fact, I even have a former police chief said that one of the ways they get intelligence more, from policing communities from women, and gossip here and there. But if you don't understand the local language, how do you pick up some of those intel from those women?
So, familiarity.
Of course, that gives credence to the fact that state police are important. Of course, with the rise of crime in the country, whether it's the Bado or kidnappings in every corner of this country, you realize that there's a particular need for the state police. But if you look at the demerits, or what you would say that the odds stacked up against the state police issue, is the fact that you have series or countless of governors who are unable to pay salaries in their state. How are they going to effectively fund the police institutions in their state?
Well, Governor Yari of the Nigerian Governors Forum, of course, they are in support of state police. He's saying, look, all the states don't need to have a state police in the first place. Those that can afford it can go ahead and have a state police.
I totally agree with you. If a state like Lagos that has enough financing, and
that's always been funding,
that have always been funding the federal police, if you like. If a state like police can afford to do that, which I believe that they can afford to do that, they've even set up some sort of local neighborhood watch. Exactly. If they can do that, yes, the Lagos state government should be allowed to do that. And while states evolve to the point where they have the resources and the wherewithal, to fund a state police, then they'll get to that point.
Do you think regional police could even help, especially for states in the same region and that seem not to be able to fund their own police?
Yeah, but I think the problem again is the fact that governors keep arguing that they want control over the police apparatus in their states, so that they want to make decisions that are effective, that are timely, to nip certain crime issues in the bud. Now, here's another issue with the state police, and that's the effective or the strength of the judiciary or the legislatures in the states. Because a state police cannot function effectively without a very, very strong legislative institution and a strong judicial institution in the state. Because except that happens, what you have, or rather, let's not even pretend, let's call a spade what it is. What we have now as a country is that you have state legislators who do not have the audacity or the courage, to take positions that are, somewhat antithetical to the positions of their governors. Okay, so until you get to that point where legislators in the states can take positions, whether or not it is in favor of their state governors, that's the time where you are ripe for a state police.
Then in addition to that, for those who have fears, is it possible that you can allay their concerns by saying, look, there will be strong laws to ensure that any state executive that wants to, apply some kind of excessive force to silence opposition, possibly, and all of that, that the laws can actually curb such possible excesses?
I think the problem of Nigeria is really not laws or availability of laws. We have these laws. The problem is the ability to follow these laws to the letter. And the reason why we don't follow these laws to the letter is the weakening, the systematic weakening of institutions, of democratic institutions in the country, wherein you have a state legislature. And I keep emphasizing on this because these are supposed to be the arbiter between the people and the executive government. These are supposed to be the representatives of the people. And unfortunately, these state legislators do not effectively represent their people in the states.
So everything boils down to not just the will now, but for the proper separation of powers, for them to stay in their lane.
Exactly, for people to be in their lane, so that if there's a flagrant disregard of constitutional provisions or of laws that are laid down by the state, they are going to be sanctioned.
But then there are enough reasons and evidence around really to even negate those that are saying that state police would be abused by state executive, because the central, most of the time, the figure at the center had been seen over years, not just this time around, to abuse the use of the police. Recall when Rotimi Amechi was the governor of Rivers State, what the commissioner of police then, Joseph Mbudi, did. And when Bring Back Our Girls campaigners marched towards the seat of power in Abuja, what they did in Abuja, the police officers, and then Otom crying out, governor of Benue State, that they did not do anything. President Buhari told the IGP to go to Benue, but instead he went to Nasarawa. So many examples.
And he even had a police orderly of governorship candidates in Anambra State withdrawn until the president had to give the orders, restore his orders.
Before the election.
Before the election.
You see, these I say these are very legitimate concerns across board. And the reason why we're having this, debate is because the institutions of democracy in our country has not evolved to that stage. And let's take a cue from South Africa. The South Africans realized, after being under apartheid for so long a time, they realized the effects of having powers concentrated on one individual at the center. And that's why when they sat down to design how they were going to be governed, they knew they could not give absolute powers to any president. And that's why today you could see that the ANC can effectively recall a Jacob Zuma, because they designed a system, parliamentary pseudo presidential system, wherein the president does not have absolute powers.
Because what the ingredients that seems to be missing in our democracy seems to be the political will to do the right thing. One could say that, look, our democracy is evolving, and as it evolves, we begin to, bring solutions as time, and fine-tune. But then again, are people really willing to do the right thing by the people? That's just the fundamental question.
This whole thing boils down to the fact that, like for instance, here you have senators who are condemning, the act, that took place in Kaduna State and what have you. And that's been a problem with Nigeria. We just condemn on the pages of newspaper. Nobody goes the long haul of challenging these issues in court, to see who went above or who went
beyond
their power. So challenge these issues in court, get a court ruling, and ensure that the governor, if he loses in court, abides by that rule, or ensure that the senator, if for instance he loses, abides by the court judgment.
It boils down. Okay, let me let you land.
Because we don't challenge. Take for instance, we're here arguing whether or not the Senate has the powers to change the sequence of elections. Not the Senate or the executive has approached the Supreme Court. We keep making all of these arguments and waste the time.
Even INEC has said we will go as far as the Supreme Court.
Exactly. So
don't see
people should go to the courts to interpret these issues.
It's good you mentioned that. I recall how the environmental sanitation order in Lagos had to be cancelled when someone decided to go to the court.
Exactly.
And then, talking about that, you mentioned South Africa as an example, but then if peradventure that kind of system, parliamentary system, is adopted in Nigeria, don't you think it would even worsen the already bad situation, knowing that political parties would be more powerful?
To be very honest with you, like I said in the beginning, every solution creates its own problem. But for me, if you asked me what kind of system would work better for this country, I for one, would argue in favor of something more parliamentary, something that looks a little like the South African system. We might tweak it left and right to suit our local peculiarities. But I want a system wherein the man at the center doesn't have as much powers as the man who occupies Aso Rock does today. I want a system wherein you can challenge the man at the center, where he can come to the floor every single week to debate his policies and answer questions from the Nigerian people. In this case, you have no right to ask your governor questions.
That almost seems like
you
something
can ask your
that
president
can only
questions.
happen maybe
and that's the
in
problem of
100
democracy that
years
we practice.
Or 200,
Anything
because
is possible, really.
it is only a civil people that can produce civil democracy or civility on any front of, you know, a national life. The Arewa Consultative Forum is saying total no to state police, re-echoing the fears and concerns of others.
Yes.
Community policing, the president has given an executive order, you know, for that to start running.
Yes.
Would that even be more ideal to state police? Because most everyone seems to be on the same page as far as community policing is concerned. And I recall the case of Florida, the Florida school shooting. At the county level, I mean, this is a murder case.
Yes.
And it's already being handled at the county level in court.
I mean, I'm sure you've heard the name Joe Apabio, the guy that President Trump granted, you know, presidential pardon.
Yeah, pardon.
Do you realize he wasn't the chief of police? He was the chief of a local county, a sheriff. He was the chief of a sheriff, which is, I mean, if you look at the tiers of policing in America, you consider the third tier of policing, all right? And he had such influence to the extent that his issues were debated, you know, at the federal level. Okay, so you can't run away from the fact that community policing, you know, is imperative, you know, at the stage that we find ourselves as a country. But the question you must ask is not whether or not we want a community police or whether or not we want a state police. Are we ready to put our brains to work and design a system that will be self-enduring, that will look at democratic principles and ideals and say that this system that we're evolving is going to deliver value to the people? Of what use is a community policing if it's not properly funded, if it's ill-equipped, if it cannot do the job? If all is going to happen is that they are going to sit down where people are playing drafts at the end of the day.
In fact, you just asked the vital questions, because if you say community police should be put in place, first, would they be armed? If they are armed, who would they be answerable to? Still to the federal government or to the state government? If to the state government, then it's going to be at the end of the day just like state police.
We shouldn't be rolling round in the same circle. And like I like to argue, the problem with Nigeria fundamentally is that we're governed by a constitution that you would not call the people's constitution. So what we're doing is that we're managing, we're managing what you call modeling through, the act of modeling through. So we're modeling through these things. It's not the people's constitution.
But many
and
calls for a
people's
constitution, but nothing was done about it. Even, I know Sarah Adeko talked about it in the past.
It's unfortunate.
Nobody's talking about it. The need for people to have their own constitution put in place and abandon that put in place by the military.
People need to sit down. If we cannot learn lessons from anywhere,
for too long.
We have not sat.
Isn't it time to really just take
we have
action
really
and get on
not
with it?
sat down as a people. We really have not sat down to agree as to how we want to be governed as a people. I mean, look at how the South Africans sat down, for goodness sake. They sat down for months. It was painful. It was enduring. They conceded what they wanted to concede. But they created a system wherein there were no absolute, that seemed to work for us as
I'm just looking at the possibility.
We need to do that.
Look, we could actually sit down, but then again, it looks like the Nigerian people have become too cynical and unbelieving of themselves. We seem to have lost confidence in whatever solutions we come out with, that we don't even give it a chance to, you know, try it out and see if it fails. Okay, why did it fail? How can we fix it in that particular area? Isn't that a problem that we really have? I mean, we'll say South Africans have done it well, Americans have done it well, the Chinese have done it well, but we don't seem to have a way of doing it well.
I think the Nigerian people do not seem to have ownership of the process, and that's the problem. The Nigerian does not feel he owns or he has a stake in government. So what I want to do is to secure myself, is to seek exemption from the chaos of the land. So I want to make enough money so I can afford a generating set, to drill a borehole in my house, to afford a night security guard. And I'm insulated from the realities of the Nigerian situation. So we do not seem to have ownership of the process. And so when solutions seem to be netted out in the public, I mean, it's just, we have this laissez-faire attitude. It's their problem and not my problem. Until the problem actually comes to your doorstep. Remember, that a lot of some of these governors who are now in support of state police were initially not in support of state
Absolutely.
police.
Okay, you know what, we'll even look at that
situation
even
came to their
further. When we
doorstep.
come back from this break, let's take a quick breather. And, of course, we'll be right back to continue this particular discussion on state police to be or not to be. That is the question.
Glad to have you back. We've been discussing the growing calls for and against state police in Nigeria and the reasons given by the supporters of either on the two sides. We've been talking to Ayodele Adiu, and joining us now to let us know his thoughts on the same topic is Olukayode Salako, is the National Coordinator of Change Agents Nigeria. Good morning to you and thank you for joining us on the show.
Thank you very much for having me in the studio.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I think it's even in place to first of all ask you if you are for the creation of state police
or against.
Or against.
Well, I am for every element of true federalism in Nigeria, in which state police or state policing falls under. There is nothing that says state police as a concept should not work in Nigeria if nothing is wrong with us as a people. State policing shouldn't be a big issue, shouldn't be what we shouldn't allow to stay. In Lagos State already, we have a replica of that. The LASMA, the Neighborhood Watch, they are more or less like a version of what we are talking about. And I have not seen where Ambode has been using the Neighborhood Watch personnel to hound anybody. I have not seen where he has been looking away when LASMA officials misbehave. In fact, the Lagos State government is even in control of LASMA attitude, the way they behave, their character, their SSEs. The state government has been able to cope it and put it under check.
But do you think if those agencies that you talk about, Neighborhood Watch, LASMA, and the rest of them, even Kai, as some have talked about, if they were armed, wouldn't it
and backed by the Constitution?
And backed by the Constitution, maybe. Wouldn't it have been a different situation?
There is nothing that has an advantage that does not have the disadvantage. Those who don't want state police are harping on the disadvantages of state policing. But on a weight scale, if you wait, you will know that on a scale of 10 points, state policing has more advantages than the disadvantage.
What do you think would be the advantages to state policing, other than the obvious points that have been raised as to, the security challenges that we have in different parts of the country would not have been the case. The IG of police, for example, maybe would not have needed to be deployed to Benue State, for instance.
Later to Gusau.
And
it had to go there.
And everywhere else where the, crisis erupts.
If we have state policing, then that can easily give birth to community policing. And when we talk about state policing, it simply means the people who are going to be our police officers are people that we have tendencies to know, to come from the same families with. For example, in Lagos State, most of the LASMA officials in my local government, I know them. Because we grew up together, and they can't easily decide to come and harass me or hand me. In fact, I can even threaten them. And because I know you, if you don't let things go according to the law, I can easily report you. So, state policing means recruiting people that you are culturally compatible with. Sometimes religiously compatible with. Ideologically compatible, because we all live in the same community. So you cannot be my police,
And those who know the
live
terrain.
live in my community, and still want to be a problem to that community. We can easily expose you. But federal policing system, you have brought one Adamu, Haliu, or Megida from Benue State, who doesn't understand my language. He doesn't know me. He has not grown up in the same community with me. I don't even know. I don't have an idea of anything. We don't even know his family members. He can decide to use that uniform to be harassing us. But if state policing system will be allowed to stay, it could easily recruit, give employment to people that we can have an idea of their family backgrounds, where they are coming from. We speak the same language. And so it can be like a caution, serve as a caution, even to the way those police officers will run the etiquette and decorum of their services. Okay. So, in my own opinion, I feel nobody is saying state policing will bring perfect security to Nigeria. No. There is no society that is crime-free.
Otherwise, we would have utopia on our hands.
All right, let me come in here now to ask you. Earlier, before we went on break, we were talking about why some are shifting grounds now on their stance on state police. I recall Deputy Senate President Ike Ekweremadu at one time was saying no. Now he's saying yes. So many people have talked about it too. A lawmaker in the House of Representatives from Benue State, many have laid credence for the need to create state police. So would you say that maybe before or even now, some politicians were and are playing politics with a call for it?
Well, absolutely. You have a case in this country where the politicians that we elect only think about the next election and not the next generation. So our thinking is usually short-fused, you know. It's just sequential. We think in 3 years' time. We think, you know, the benefits for what we are going to get, you know, at the ballot paper or the ballot box at the end of the day. He's raised very important points that seem to fall in line with the merits, you know, of the state police. You know, but while we list out the merits of the state police and the reasons why we need this, we also need to be doing a whole lot of thinking, because the ability to have a state police is not just to recruit people and give them guns to go around the streets. There needs to be a perfect training institution. There needs to be some sort, I mean, you can't set up a police in 2018 like you did in 1960. So you want a police institution, you know, that is digitally savvy, that, you know, is IT proficient, that can use technology effectively, and that can deploy, you know, global standards. This requires funding, this requires expertise, this requires training over time, and it's not going to happen in 6, 7, 8 months. So I hope that while we're talking about state policing, we're not assuming that we're just going to send out a newspaper advert for people who want to come and then people will just give you guns after 6 months, and then you just start policing.
Otherwise, the advantages will become disadvantages.
And then we'll go back to square one. So we need to put a lot of thought to the things that we do in this country. We need to think deeply and think ahead about the things that we want to do. So yes, the fact that state police is important, and I dare say that is very important in a federal state system that we practice and in the present day Nigeria. But we must also look very closely at the fundamentals that will ensure that this police that we want to institute will deliver value to the people, will be professional, and will do their jobs diligently. And
I've been given an example, you know, while discussing this same issue of, was it Georgia, you know, one of the Balkanized Russian states, where the president actually disbanded the whole police force and had to start from the scratch, because he, you know, like they say, the police of any nation is a good reflection of the kind of society that is. Is it possible that Nigeria can actually go that route if we really want the kind of police that we require? Oh, some will be alarmed already by that, just that thought.
You see?
Because, I mean, we have said the Nigeria police is the most corrupt in the world.
According to reports.
According to reports. The NBS came out with that report.
Yes.
The Nigeria police is the most corrupt. So how can you, within the same police force, bring out people who can police Nigeria the way it should be policed? Or should we rely on the new recruits, hopefully, that might come in to the police to add to this 300,000?
You see, there is no system that can work in any clime, they shouldn't be able to work in Nigeria. If Georgia had to disband the whole policing system to reform, to reorganize and recruit a new set of, it could also happen here. But it is not going to happen here because, one, our nature. We have a peculiar nature here.
Different from other human beings on the face of the earth.
It's not only the Nigerian police. It's not only the Nigerian police that is corrupt. Go to the civil service. Go to the private sector. In fact, go to ShopRite.
Allegedly corrupt.
If you don't give those security officials in ShopRite, just pass through their doors 3 times, don't give them money. The 4th time they won't answer, you greet them. So that is an element of corruption.
So the fault is not in our stars. It is in
our nature.
ourselves.
It is peculiar. And I think the federal government should start looking into how can something be done about our nature.
In the nature of the systems that allowed it, because you cannot just put a blanket conjecture that all Nigerians are this, because there are so many that are doing the country proud. I think we should point that out.
One of them.
So if you say you're not,
and we could all say we are,
Ayo
could say the same thing. I could say the same thing.
Fundamentally,
yes,
the society teaches us who we become.
Yeah.
We're reflection of
it's an environmental thing.
What you need is a cultural shock. And the person who does that's why leadership is usually important. It's because it's the leader of a country or the leaders that you elect into a country that would enforce that cultural shock.
That was why I mentioned system.
Except you have such leaders who can come with a new kind of thinking, a new way of doing things to shock the system.
But then the leaders are in the society, they are products of the society as well.
We have one right now.
Who is?
The present man in charge of the federal government, the president, is coming with a new way of doing things. But because of our nature, we are resisting it.
The same president that former Olusegun Obasanjo wrote a letter about the way he's running his government in a clannish and nepotic way.
And all that.
That is politics, my sister. Those who want President Muhammadu Buhari to go don't care about who he is, his performance or his achievements. This is politics. They had an arrangement which Mr. President was not running the government in line with. Let's leave that. You see, we are talking about reforming our system. If you want to reform a system, you still don't put the same people of that peculiar nature there. Systems don't run themselves.
So you put relatives there.
It is human beings who run systems. And if you create state police and you still put the same human beings with the same mentality of putting on the uniform to be looking for how to make 5 times their salaries, their normal salaries, from that service.
Former SGF Lawal had to be removed because of something. Even the IGP is being accused by a national lawmaker of putting his hand in the kitty and doing some other stuff. So is this just about the people? You said it's in the nature, but then Nigeria is estimated to be a country of about at least 193 people.
Religiously 190 people.
90 million.
Religiously? Okay, I don't know about that.
All right.
I will have to.
Yes.
We could spend all 2 hours talking about this. And well, thank you, gentlemen, for joining us this morning. Olukayode Salako is the National Coordinator, Change Agents of Nigeria. I really hope that change can happen. And Ayodele Adio, it's always a delight having you on the show.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen.